What's up, people? I am one of your hosts, Phoenix.
And I am your other host, Titan.
And welcome to NTAT Redfall Review in Progress, Part 2. So this is our part 2 of our review in progress, and we're gonna give our final thoughts at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. So let's jump right into the video, shall we?
All right, and don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, so we're gonna jump right into our cons for this. Since we started with our positives and we had more positives, things kind of shifted for us a little bit, so we're gonna jump right into the cons for this video. And one of the cons for me was that the Raven ability has no reticle.
Right.
So as you're throwing it, some of the other abilities, like the C4 for Remy or yours, you have some kind of indication of where your ability is going. With the Raven, depending on where your scope is or what type of gun that you're using, so if you have the sniper and you go to throw the bird, there's no reticle. You don't know where you're going.
Right.
But if you have a shotgun or a pistol, you have the reticle of the gun to kind of guide you.
I actually had the same issue with Dev, with his throwing out of his electrical stake.
Yeah.
If you hold down the ability button, then you have a little arc where you can see where it goes. But if you're just trying to fast throw it, you kind of have to eye it. There's no reticle there to let you know that this is where it's going to land when you're throwing it. And a lot of the times that's what I was doing. It was like in the heat of battle. So I'm trying to throw this out like quickly to get it stuck into an enemy instead of having to hold down the button. So I would have much preferred if there was a reticle or the same weapon reticle constantly that was on the screen.
Yeah, it would make it a lot easier in those transitions.
Yeah, I agree there. All right, so next we want to talk about weapon utility. One of the things that happens in a lot of RPG type games is your pistol becomes obsolete after the beginning of the game. This is normally replaced with a stronger or a different type of pistol. Well, in this game, that really doesn't happen. Now, your legendaries or your, what is it called, unrivaled, so your gold type weapons, there's some really powerful pistols in there. But outside of that, they fall off compared to all the other weapons. And this is something I would have liked to seen picked up. And they could have done this easily, in my opinion, by having a skill tree based off of the specific weapons. Either every player, or rather every character, have a section where they have all the different weapons that they could kind of spec into, or have specific weapons for specific characters. Like your character that you use, Jacob, even though he's not technically spec'd into sniper rifles, his kit is set up for long range. So it works really well. And I would have loved to see maybe somebody like Layla, who uses the umbrella, maybe she could have spec'd into the pistol, which maybe she could have had something where as you spec into your umbrella, that it opens up. Now, when she does it, she uses both hands to keep it open. So maybe at one point she can only use one hand and she can use a pistol to shoot through it.
That would be really cool.
Yeah, and I think that would have helped out a lot. Maybe, I think you asked once before when we were using those characters, like, if I shoot through it, will I get a bonus damage? And I was like, no, you don't. Again, that was a missed opportunity, because that's the first thing you think about was, hey, I should be able to shoot through this and get a bonus. So doing something like that with the pistol would have given a lot more utility. And I think that was a missed opportunity for a lot of these weapons.
And I think that's kind of the big overarching issue with Redfall, is that as good as the game is, there's a lot of missed opportunities.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that's kind of like the biggest con of them all, is like there's things that they could implement that they just didn't.
Agreed.
So the latest patch released on May 8th is kind of the game changer for our opinions.
Especially for co-op.
Yep. This hurt the game a lot. A lot of issues that we didn't have previously. After this fix, it seemed like everything started going downhill in a really negative way.
Right.
So after the patch, one of the biggest glitches for me was when we went into the nest. Every time that I would go to slide and turn at the same time, I would end up going into the world and then end up either floating, or I would end up stuck in a wall of some kind.
Right.
And it would be so devastating to the game that we couldn't continue and we'd have to restart everything.
Right in the middle of going through one of the nests, which is very annoying. Now, we've had glitches prior to, but they'd all been funny glitches and things that would kind of course correct themselves after we, let's say we did a fast travel into one of the safe houses, we'd float, or a number of other things that we kind of mentioned in our first video. And that would course correct once we left out of the safe house. But this would not correct itself. So you were kind of crouched down or inside of, I think one time I tried to cleverly get you out of stuck in a tree, and I used one of my teleporters, which teleported you out of the tree, but then you were stuck looking like a shrunk Mario.
And I was just continuously like going like, oh, I can't see. And I was just like, it was a nightmare.
That was really bad.
But But it seems like the nest brings up a lot of our issues. Because another issue that we have is every time that we go to leave the nest, we aren't able to use our start button. And it's not just us, this is a known issue without the community, is that once you leave, your start button just doesn't work. Now you can use the map button to get into your inventory and stuff like that.
Right.
But really, who wants to go through that whole other process and losing a button just because you did a nest?
Right, and that led us to, after we got out of it every time, booting out of the game, going back into the game, so we would have our start button back.
Yeah, it became a ritual. Every time we would leave, we didn't even question it. At that point, we're just like, oh, okay, time to restart.
Yep. And this leads into our biggest problem, which is a leveling bug. And of course, this is kind of across the board. Now, it doesn't affect single player, but it massively affects co-op, which is a big problem because our review and our fun all come from the co-op aspect. Now, remember, Titan is playing on PC, I'm playing on Xbox Series X, and it's working for both of us no matter what. And I've also tested this out with a Series X and a Series S playing together. It still works the same way. I've seen it across the community the same way. So what is happening is one player or both players are spawning in at level 1. Even if you're, I think at one point in time we were at level 17.
Yeah.
And one of us would come in at level 1, the other one at level 17, or both at level 1. And so ultimately what happens is when you get onto the world, the enemies would either, they would scale to level 1, meaning that you would one-shot everything, all the way to the point where Titan was punching a high-level vampire and just knocking him down into a dazed state each time.
Yep.
Or the enemies are one-shotting you. But we found that more often than not, we were the ones that were one-shotting enemies, and this broke the game for us completely, because without any difficulty, then the game goes from a really fun co-op adventure to why am I doing this?
Yeah. One of the biggest, I think what set it for me is the first time we spawned the rook, the very first time, I used my UV beam and one beam froze him. And that was it. That was the end of the fight. And I was like, wait a second. I'm like, I was expecting, a fight here.
Right.
This was, I think, when we first started realizing that there was an issue.
That it was an issue going on. Yeah,
beforehand,
that was our first.
it was like a little bit like, okay, we're just, we're that strong.
We're that
doing
good. Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, but this was a boss here. I'm like, what's happening?
Right.
And it ruined it for us.
And we kept going, and we saw that we were one-shotting a lot. We summoned the rook 2 more times after that.
Yep.
And we were like, okay, let's try punching him. He went down.
Yep.
Let's try one bullet to the toe. He went down. It didn't matter. And we were like, okay, something's wrong. So that's when we started doing the research and realized other people were having the same issue.
Yep, but there doesn't seem to be a fix at the moment.
But as of May 13th, at the recording of this video, there's no patch to fix this.
And considering that the last patch was May 8th, that's a lot of time that they just haven't been fixing these issues. And I'm wondering why that is.
I'm assuming that it's just taking longer than they thought, because again, they sent a patch out to fix a lot of the problems that people were seeing in single player. It kind of broke multiplayer. So I'm assuming they're like, okay, well, how are we going to get this coded so that we don't fix one thing and break another? So it looks like it's taking longer, which is, again, hurting a game that was already not well received.
Yep.
So moving on to our pros, I want to start with the Vampire Nest.
Okay.
I thought those were really fun missions.
Yes.
Now, I do want to put the little caveat that we were having a glitch in there where we couldn't see all the modifiers. We kept seeing the same modifiers, although we realized there were other things going on. This was a really cool mixed together mission. So with the modifiers, as you go in, it can spawn different enemy types, different boss types as you're going through. You never know until you're getting in there.
Yep.
Then there's this, how do I approach this type situation? And we came up with a lot of really cool combinations as we were going through. Then getting to the end of it and destroying the heart, and then this race to, okay, which doors are we gonna hit so we can get our loot and then get out? And that was really fun because it sucks getting to the end of that and not getting in before it collapses and not getting your XP.
That makes me really mad. It really does.
Exactly. So we got to the point where we were like, hey, we're going to go through maybe 3 of the 4 doors and call out where the main door to get out is, and we're hightailing that at 20 seconds.
Yep.
So I absolutely love that mission type. We do that quite often. Well, up until we started losing our start button, of course. But that was a really fun mission type.
And kind of a fun backstory to the nest. Our first couple ones that we did, we actually did wrong. And we found out from the community that we were doing it wrong is that after we would grab the vial, we would just hightail it back to the beginning. That's where we thought the door was. We're like, okay, we got like 30 seconds to get there, and we would just run. And with everything crackling in the background and the music and the timer counting down.
Oh, and don't forget, stuff was actually crumbling down and falling from the ceiling.
I mean, it seemed much more intense when you're running. You're like, if I even stop for a second, I'm gonna fall into this abyss.
Right.
I wasn't sure what was happening, but I wasn't taking the chances.
Right. So we did that completely wrong the first 2 nests that we did. Just running backwards, going back through the entire board, trying to get out of there.
Yeah, which, I mean, still was a lot of fun.
It was.
It was. But once we started getting the loot and stuff, it made it better. So another thing for us is the tactical fun that you can have in this game.
Oh, yeah.
You can really set up some really cool things. And something that Phoenix told me that I missed earlier is that you can throw, when playing Remy's character, you can throw the C4 on the robotic dog and it stays there. And so you can make some cool combinations with throwing the C4 on the dog, then throwing it out to lure everyone to it, and then blowing everyone up.
Shout out to Anthony for discovering that. That was a really cool tidbit.
That's really cool. Because I had a similar idea on my first playthrough, as I was like, oh, I'll throw the dog out, and then once everyone gets there, then I'll throw the C4.
C4, right.
But a lot of times you get into a battle, and you don't have the time to kind of plan that out properly. And so finding that out was like really cool. And another thing that we like to do, and it's really cool, is if we have the distance, me using Jacob, I can snipe from a distance and start picking people off. But then Phoenix can use his character Dev to teleport behind them. And so while they're all aiming at me and coming to me, he can just wipe them out from behind them. And I mean, this sets up some really awesome gameplay for us.
Oh my God, yes. It was really cool. This, especially like the idea of, first of all, any idea that you think might work, the developers seemed like they were like, yeah, let's do this. I remember Titan was like, hey, can you throw your teleporter through a window? And in my head, I'm thinking, nah, they're not gonna let that happen. We probably need to break it first and then throw it through it. But sure enough, I was able to throw my teleporter through a closed window. It broke the glass, went in, and we could teleport in there. And these made some great tactical advantages, as well as some great fun. As you talked about, drawing the enemies near you as you were sniping from top of a building, I would throw my teleporter behind it, and I'm shotgunning people from behind. It was so satisfying.
Yep. So really, the only limit to things that you can do is your imagination. Because really, it's finding out what you can do and just trying it. It's experimenting and seeing what works. And 9 times out of 10, it works.
Like your kit with Dev. We talked about you sniping from a distance and like, oh, I don't have a stake on here. How do I get to him? And then let's try throwing out the Raven. And sure enough, the Raven would kill the downed vampire instantly, allowing you to stay from a distance. Just experimenting. And it seemed like a lot of those things worked.
So one thing that doesn't work, though, is that I can't use the Raven to blow up the red barrels. If you watched our previous video, you know I love blowing stuff up. And unfortunately, I can't use the Raven to do that.
Yeah, being that it's only 1 out of the 10 things he can't blow Phoenix up with, I'm not too heartbroken over this one.
It's a Raven. That one hurts.
Okay, so our next pro is going to be the builds. Now, even though you're using Jacob and your kit is built for long distance and Dev's is built for close range, we can actually mix and match.
Yeah.
And that's something that I love, especially with the passives. So when we're close together, I have a passive that allows you to cause more damage to vampires. So even though your kit is for long range, up close, you still gain that passive. And at the same turn, when I'm close to you, I actually get increased headshot damage.
Yep.
This makes for some really cool fun. It's also one of the reasons why we thought during the bug that we were just destroying everything.
Yeah. And what I think is really cool is yours is geared for damage towards vampires.
Right.
So you do extra vampire damage, while mine is headshot damage for humans.
Right.
So we had that trade-off that, you know, if you're just with one character, you only have that one buff.
Exactly.
But then together, we have a whole new set of buffs, and it works really well together.
It does, and that's why I said this game is built from the ground up as a co-op, and that's where the fun is.
And so kind of a change from our previous video when we talked about how missions are go here, do that, or it's, hey, go find a key, and then you're searching through a house for a key that's hidden on a table somewhere that you didn't even look. But this time we ran into a mission, the doll mission.
Yes.
This changed everything. This was a phenomenal mission from the ground up.
It was.
This, it asked you to find dolls, but it gave you a riddle, and not even really a riddle, it just told you where they were. It's like, this doll likes to be in the kitchen. This doll likes to garden year round. This doll is at the tippy top. And you just go and look in those locations, like the garden and stuff, and even the dollhouse itself showed you where they were.
Right,
The
if you paid attention.
If you paid attention.
Right.
And it was so phenomenal. But the ambience of the whole entire place, the story, the echoes, I mean, it was just driven to find out more. And then when you were finished, you're like, really? You were really angry. Like, you started understanding the story more, understanding the characters more. And I remember we were just sitting there and there was a moment of silence afterwards. We're like, wait, this took a really bad turn.
Right.
I'm like, this is not what we expected. And it was phenomenal, which then led us to our next boss.
Right.
And I think this was our first real boss
Right,
fight.
it was.
With the Hollow Man. It was incredible. I mean, this was hands down. When I was looking for a fight in this game, that was it. That was a phenomenal fight.
It was.
And that's kind of like when we were talking about how we're one-shotting everything. If that was a boss that we went into with the first time and we just one-shot him, I would have been furious.
Right, that would have been a almost hands down, we quit, we're done playing it.
Yep, but fortunately for us, that was one time we didn't have an issue, and it was
That was before the patch.
It was before the patch, and I mean, it was just everything about the missions started to change, and it stopped being go here, do that. It was more of here's the story. Now, when we got back to the second map, the missions are kind of like starting back at the go here, do this, and you know, the very monotonous, but it's okay because we're expecting the story to be driven further ahead, and that's what drives us to the next point, is trying to get to the next story.
Right, exactly, and it lets you know that they had the ability to give you these types of missions, and I wish this had been lived through the entire game.
Yep.
But those were some fantastic missions, and the boss fight, as you said, was phenomenal. It was a very good boss battle. We've already given a little too many spoilers, so we're not gonna get into the spoiler of that, but if you get to that point, it's a great battle.
Yep.
So these are our overall shared thoughts. The game is really fun. There's a lot of fun to be had in this game. If you have Game Pass, this is a game that you definitely want to play with friends, but it's not worth the $70 price point. But for reference, I think there might have been 2 games so far this year in 2023 that is worth $70. Also, with the bug going on right now, I cannot in good conscience recommend this game right now.
Yeah.
This is just my honest opinion. I think you should wait until the game's patched. Make sure you have Game Pass. Jump in and have some fun.
Well, folks, that actually wraps up our Redfall video. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to join us every Friday morning. We'll be there. You be there.